There we go. So, very naturally not. Did you see Miss Doran on the day before the wedding? So remember, Miss Doran is our bride. He answered, yes. Was she in good spirits? Never better. She kept talking of what we should do in our future lives. Indeed, that is very interesting. And on the morning of the wedding, she was as bright as possible, at least until after the ceremony. And did you observe any change in her then? So this is going to be after the ceremony that we get this, a change. Here, a change in her. After the ceremony. Well, to tell the truth, I saw then the first signs that I had ever seen that her temper was just a little sharp. The incident, however, was too trivial to relate and can have no possible bearing upon the case. What does this word trivial mean? Anyone know? Sorry? It's not important, exactly, right? Something small and not important. A trivial matter. Something is small and not important. Pray, let us have it for all that. Oh, it is childish. She dropped her bouquet as we went towards the vestry. She was passing the front pew at the time, and it fell over into the pew. There was a moment's delay, but the gentleman in the pew handed it up to her and again, and it did not appear to be the worse for the fall. Yet when I spoke to her of the matter, she answered me abruptly. And in the carriage on our way home, she seemed absurdly agitated over this trifling cause. So this bouquet dropping, she dropped her sets of flowers, and it's for some reason really disturbed her when the man gave it back to her. Let's figure out why. Indeed! You say that there was a gentleman in the pew. Some of the general public were present then. Oh yes, it is impossible to exclude them when the church is open. So do you remember how many people were at the church? 6, right? So there are only 6 people who were invited to this wedding. Why is there this random person? Kind of strange. That's what kind of where Sherlock Holmes is going with this. Who is this general public person? This random gentleman. This gentleman was not one of your wife's friends. No. I call him a gentleman by courtesy, but he was quite a common-looking person. I hardly noticed his appearance. But really, I think that we are wandering rather far from the point. Lady St. Simon then returned from the wedding in a less cheerful frame of mind than she had gone to it. What did she do on re-entering her father's house? Remember, because if we follow our timeline, they went from the wedding, where she got disturbed, to the wedding breakfast at her father's house. I saw her in conversation with her maid. And who is her maid? Alice is her name. She is an American and came from California with her. So we get introduced to a new character here. We get introduced to Alice, her handmaid. So Alice the maid. A confidential servant? A little too much. It seemed to me that her mistress allowed her to take great liberties. Still, of course, in America, they look upon these things in a different way. Remember, this guy's a royal. He's a lord, right? And he doesn't think well of the peasants or the common class, the servants. He thinks he shouldn't talk to them or they shouldn't be close to him. But in America, if we hire someone to be a maid for us, we're usually pretty nice to them, right? We talk to them like a normal person. So there's a slight difference in culture here. It's really interesting. How long did she speak to this Alice? Oh, for a few minutes. I had something else to think of. You did not overhear what they said? Lady St. Simon said something about jumping a claim. She was accustomed to use slang of the kind. I have no idea what she meant. American slang is very expressive sometimes. And what did your wife do when she finished speaking to her maid? She walked into the breakfast room. On your arm? Oh, no, alone. She was very independent in little matters like that. Then after we had sat down for 10 minutes or so, she rose hurriedly, muttered some words of apology, and left the room. She never came back. But this maid, Alice, as I understand, deposes that she went to her room, covered her bride's dress with a long ulster, put on a bonnet, and went out. So, a couple things there. If you just got married as a bride, what are you still going to be wearing for a lot of the day? Dress, right? Now, if you were going out in the street, like if you were walking down the street, would you want that dress to drag on the ground or be exposed? No, you wouldn't, okay? So, what they would do is they would cover the bride's dress with a long ulster right here. And that's basically just a covering that they would put over the dress. Then a bonnet. You'll see that a couple times in this period's writing. A bonnet is just a hat that you would put over your hair. Just a hat, essentially. Not like it sets on everything. So usually they would put it on and then tie it together right here so it wouldn't go anywhere. Quite so, and she was afterwards seen walking into Hyde Park in company with Flora Millar, a woman who is now in custody and who had already made a disturbance at Mr. Doran's house that morning. So, the bride, right here, is seen walking into Hyde Park. Is seen with who? Flora. Right, Flora Millar, or Miller, or however you want to say her name. With the mistress. Because remember, Flora Millar was the random woman who made a disturbance at the breakfast, and who was kicked out. We learned later that she was the dancer at a club that the husband, Lord St. Simon, would visit upon occasion. We'll leave that there where it is. So that's kind of strange that the bride and this woman are walking into Hyde Park, which is like across the street, down the way a little bit, all right? The bride is seen walking into Hyde Park with the mistress. That's in just that section there. Ah, yes, I should like a few particulars as to this young lady and your relations to her. So Sherlock Holmes asks him hey, can you clarify, what's y'all's relationship? A little bit. And this is going to make him stutter a little bit, all right? Lord St. Simon shrugged his shoulders and raised his eyebrows. We've been on friendly footing for some years. I may say on a very friendly footing. She used to be at the Allegro. I have not treated her ungenerously, and she had no just cause of complaint against me. But you know that what women are, Mr. Holmes. Flora was a dear little thing, but exceedingly hot-headed and devotedly attached to me. She wrote me dreadful letters when she heard that I was about to be married. And to tell the truth, the reason why I had the marriage celebrated so quietly was that I feared lest there might be a scandal in the church. Okay, so now we get the reasoning why this wedding was so small. Because remember, both people one's a royal, one's a wealthy millionaire. Why would they have such a tiny wedding of 6 people? That we were curious about that yesterday, and here we get the reason why. Tell the truth, the reason I had the marriage celebrated so quietly was that I feared lest there might be a scandal in the church. Reason for a small wedding. Right there. She came to Mr. Doran's door just after we returned, and she endeavored to push her way in, uttering very abusive expressions toward my wife, and even threatening her. But I had foreseen the possibility of something of the sort, and I had 2 police fellows there in private clothes, who soon pushed her out again. She was quiet when she saw that there was no good in making a row. Did your wife hear all this? No, thank goodness, she did not. And she was seen walking with this very woman afterwards. Yes, that is what Mr. Lestrade of Scotland Yard looks upon as so serious. It is thought that Flora decoyed my wife out and laid some terrible trap for her. Decoyed. There you go, decoyed. My apologies. Well, it is a possible supposition. You think so too? I did not say a probable one, but do not yourself look upon this as likely? I do not think Flora would hurt a fly. Still, jealousy is a strange transformer of characters. Pray, what is your own theory as to what took place? Well, really, I came to seek a theory, not to propound one. I have given you all the facts. Since you asked me, however, I may say that it has occurred to me as possible that the excitement of this affair, the consciousness that she had made so immense a social stride, had the effect of causing some little nervous disturbance in my wife. In short, she has become suddenly deranged. So what does this word deranged mean? Crazy, right? She has gone insane. So crazy. Insane. And what does he think that has caused this insanity all of a sudden? Someone from over here help me out?
The dirt.
What has disturbed her? Not just a disturbance, but look at the word before it. A nervous disturbance, right? He said, she has made so immense a social stride. Think about it. What if I put you all of a sudden from here in South Haven, Mississippi, sitting down in this classroom, and all of a sudden put you in front of the camera and broadcasted you in front of the entire world, where every single person saw you? Would you do really well all of a sudden? No, you wouldn't. Don't be lying over there. You would not. Okay, I'd sit there and go the whole time. All right, I'd be freaking out. I would probably have a nervous disturbance. I would get suddenly deranged. But this woman we see is not the same type of woman. She's not making that massive much of a stride. She's going from being a millionaire, kind of nobody in America, to being a somebody royal in England. And he is claiming that that massive social stride going from that section to that section of life has caused her a little nervous disturbance. That's what he claims has caused her to go insane. That social stride has caused a nervous disturbance in my wife. Well, really, when I consider that she has turned her back, I will not say upon me, but upon so much that many have aspired to without success, I can hardly explain it in any other fashion. Well, certainly that is also a conceivable hypothesis, or hypothesis is like an educated guess. It's an idea that you have to back up multiple times. Said Holmes, smiling. And now, Lord St. Simon, I think that I have nearly all my data. May I ask whether you were seated on the breakfast table so that you could see out the window? We could see the other side of the road and the park. The park he's talking about is Hyde Park. Hyde Park. Notice how it's capitalized. Quite so. Then I do not think that I need to detain you longer. I shall communicate with you. Should you be fortunate enough to solve this problem, said our client, rising. I have solved it. Whoa, so we already have a claim by Sherlock Holmes that he solved it. What was that? I said that I have solved it. Where then is my wife? That is a detail which I shall speedily supply. Lord St. Simon shook his head. I'm afraid that it will take wiser heads than yours or mine, he remarked, and bowing in a stately, old-fashioned manner, he departed. So he bowed in a really old-fashioned way and left. It is a very good of Lord St. Simon to honor my head by putting it on level with his own, said Sherlock, Holmes laughing. So this guy leaves, and immediately after he bowed to them, he left. Sherlock makes a joke saying, I'm so thankful that he bowed to me so that his gigantic ego can finally be on my level, said Sherlock Holmes laughing. I think that I shall have a whiskey and a soda and a cigar after all this cross-questioning. I formed my conclusions as to the case before our client came into the room. Oh, my dear Holmes, I have notes of several similar cases, though none, as I remarked before, which were quite as prompt. My whole examination served to turn my conjecture into a certainty. Circumstantial evidence is occasionally very convincing, as when you find a trout in the milk, to quote Thoreau's example. Now, here's an interesting little bit here. As when you find a trout in the milk, to quote Thoreau's example. Circumstantial evidence is occasionally very convincing. Does anyone in here get that? Anyone online? No? I don't even get that, okay? He is quoting this guy named Thoreau, who is a famous author. He was a philosopher, essentially, in this time, a little bit before this time. But I don't understand this reference whatsoever. So this falls really flat for us. We don't understand this section. And that's going to happen every once in a while. Whenever we have something this old, some of the examples they pull, some of the references they make, we're not going to get it, right? Now, and they would not understand if we tried to reference, like a famous music video these days. They would not understand that at all. So it's just a different time period type thing, all right? But I have heard all that you have heard, without, however, the knowledge of pre-existing cases, which serves me so well. There was a parallel instance in Aberdeen some years back, and something on very much the same lines at Munich, the year after the Franco-Prussian War. It is one of these cases, but hello, here is Lestrade. Good afternoon, Lestrade. You'll find an extra tumbler upon the sideboard, and there are cigars in the box. So, we have Lestrade now entering the scene. We mentioned him at the very beginning of the story, Lestrade. Lestrade is a detective for Scotland Yard. Scotland Yard. Detective for Scotland Yard, Lestrade. We've never been introduced to him yet. We're going to see that even though he's a detective, when he compares himself, or when we compare himself to Sherlock Holmes, he is like a bumbling idiot in comparison. All right. The official detective was attired in a pea jacket and cravat, which gave him a decidedly nautical appearance, and he carried a black canvas bag in his hand. With a short greeting, he seated himself and lit a cigar which had been offered to him. "What's up, then?" asked Holmes, with a twinkle in his eye. "You look dissatisfied." "Ugh, and I feel dissatisfied. It is this infernal St. Simon marriage case. I can make neither head nor tail of the business." "Really? You surprise me." "Who ever heard of such a mixed affair? Every clue seems to slip through my fingers. I have been at work upon it all day." "And very wet it seems to have made you," said Holmes, laying his hand upon the arm of the pea jacket. "Yes, I've been dragging the Serpentine. In heaven's name, what for?" "In search of the body of Lady St. Simon." So, dragging the Serpentine, right here, the Serpentine, he was in the river, basically. He was next to the river looking for a body, all right? So, dragging the Serpentine right here means looking, I should say, in a river. So he's been like going along the banks of the river, having to get in every once in a while. We do know this is the fall. This is autumnal. Because we were in the very beginning, we got the idea of it was raining and change of weather outside. So he's been looking at the river outside. It's been raining all day long. "In heaven's name, what for?" "In search of the body of Lady St. Simon." Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his chair and laughed heartily. "Have you dragged the basin of Trafalgar Square fountain?" he asked. "Why? What do you mean?" "Because you have just as good a chance of finding this lady in that one as in the other." Lestrade shot an angry glance at my companion. "I suppose you know all about it," he snarled. "Well, I've only just heard the facts, but my mind is made up." "Oh, indeed. Then you think that the Serpentine plays no part in the matter?" "I think it very unlikely. Then perhaps you will kindly explain how it is that we found this in it. He opened his bag as he spoke, and tumbled onto the floor a wedding dress of watered silk, a pair of white satin shoes, and a bride's wreath and veil, all discolored and soaked in water. "There," said he, putting a new wedding ring upon the top of the pile. "There's a little nut for you to crack, Master Holmes." "Oh, indeed," said my friend, blowing the blue rings into the air. "Did you drag them from the Serpentine?" "No, they were found floating near the margin by a park keeper. They have been identified as her clothes, and it seemed to me that if the clothes were where the body would not be that far off, then the body would not be far off." "By the same brilliant reasoning, every man's body is to be found in the neighborhood of his wardrobe. And pray, what did you hope to arrive at through this?" "At some evidence implicating Flora Millar in the disappearance." "I'm afraid you will find it difficult." "Are you indeed now?" cried Lestrade, with some bitterness. "I'm afraid, Holmes, that you are not very practical with your deductions and your inferences. You have made 2 blunders in as many minutes. This dress does implicate Miss Flora Millar. So, even if you are a detective, I would not try to compare yourself to Sherlock Holmes himself. It's like you go walking up to Elon Musk and going, "Hey, I bet I know more about rockets than you." Probably don't, all right? "And how?" So he's going to have Lestrade explain how he has made 2 mistakes already about this case. And Lestrade's going to attempt to do this. In the dress, it is a pocket. And the pocket is a card case. And the card case is a note. And here is the very note. He slapped it down upon the table in front of him. "Listen to this. You will see me when all is ready. Come at once. F.H.M." Oh, okay. Now, notice here that they still, because this is not their words, this is from a letter, so someone else is speaking it, they still put it in quotations, in single quotations. Notice also that there's great use of a colon up here. Listen to this, colon. Then they have it. That is one use of a colon that we've talked about during week 2, I believe. Now, my theory all along has been that Lady St. Simon was decoyed away by Flora Millar, that she, with confederates, no doubt, was responsible for her disappearance. Here, signed with her initials, is the very note which was no doubt quietly slipped into her hand at the door, and which lured her within their reach. "Very good, Lestrade," said Holmes, laughing. "You really are very fine indeed. Let me see it." He took up the paper in a listless way, but his attention instantly became riveted, and he gave a little cry of satisfaction. "This is important indeed, indeed important," said he. "Ha! You find it so?" "Extremely, so I congratulate you warmly." Lestrade rose in his triumph and bent his head to look. "Why," he shrieked, "you're looking at the wrong side. On the contrary, this is the right side." So, instead of looking at this message here, he flipped it around. Not looking at the message at all. He was looking at the back of the message. And this is, of course, going to freak Lestrade out. It's like, "Are you kidding me? You're just playing with me now." "The right side? You're mad. Here's a note written in pencil over here. And over here is what appears to be the fragment of a hotel bill, which interests me deeply." "There's nothing in it. I looked at it before," said Lestrade. Are y'all able to follow this along pretty well without breaking it down? So far, like, the story is just rather easy in this section. October 4th, rooms and breakfast. 2S 60, cocktails 1S, lunch 2S 60, glass sherry 8D. I see nothing in that. "Very likely not. It is most important all the same. As to the note, it is important also, or at least the initials are. So I congratulate you again." "I've wasted time enough," said Lestrade, rising. "I believe in hard work and not in sitting by the fire spinning fine theories. Good day, Mr. Holmes, and we shall see which gets to the bottom of the matter first. He gathered up the garments, thrust them into the bag, and made for the door. "Just one hint to you, Lestrade," drawled Holmes before his rival vanished. I will tell you the true solution of the matter. Lady St. Simon is a myth. There is not, and there never has been, any such person. Whoa. That's what he claims is how to solve the mystery right there, is that Lady St. Simon was never even real, ever, which is interesting. Lestrade looked sadly at my companion. Then he turned to me, tapped his forehead 3 times, shook his head solemnly, and hurried away. So what does that mean right there? That when he says he looked at me, tapped his forehead 3 times, shook his head solemnly. What's he trying to imply? If someone's talking to me, and I go over to this person and go,
like think about it, or
not just think about it, he's crazy, right? It's like, in today's time we would go like this, like they're insane a little bit. Instead, they just did a slightly modified version of that. They were just like, crazy. So, he is implying his insanity, or his craziness. He is implying with a physical action Holmes' insanity, which is very interesting. It's very fun. He had hardly shut the door behind him when Holmes rose to put on his overcoat. There is something in what the fellow says about outdoor work, he remarked. So I think, Watson, that I must leave you to your papers for a while. It was after 5 o'clock when Sherlock Holmes left me, but I had no time to be lonely, for within an hour there arrived a confectioner's man with a very large flat box. This he unpacked with the help of a youth whom he had brought with him, and presently, to my very great astonishment, a quite Epicurean little cold supper began to be laid upon our humble lodging house mahogany. There were a couple of brace of cold woodcock, a pheasant, a pâté de foie gras pie, with a group of ancient and cobwebby bottles. Having laid out all these luxuries, my 2 visitors vanished away, like the genie of the Arabian Nights, with no explanation save that the things had been paid for and were ordered to this address. So, it's super strange. What if all of a sudden you were just sitting at home after people left, and within an hour, a Postmates or a DoorDasher knocked on the door, said, "Oh yeah, hey, someone paid for all this food for you," and started laying out all the food for you. It'd be kind of strange. It's really strange right here. He said these people didn't even talk to him; they just left. And of course, all this food here is very fancy food. All right, pâté itself is very expensive. I think cobwebby bottles showcases that this could be really old wine. So better wine, really good one. Just before 9 o'clock, Sherlock Holmes stepped briskly into the room. His features were gravely set, but there was a light in his eyes which made me think that he had not been disappointed in his conclusions. "They've laid to supper then," he said, rubbing his hands. "You seem to expect company. They've laid for 5. So they don't have, it's not just a little bit of food, it's enough food to feed 5 people. All right? That's a lot. "Yes, I fancy we may have some company dropping in," said he. "I am surprised that Lord St. Simon has not already arrived. Ha! I fancy that I hear his step now upon the stairs." It was indeed our visitor of the afternoon who came bustling in, dangling his glasses more vigorously than ever, and with a very perturbed expression upon his aristocratic features. "My messenger reached you then?" asked Holmes. "Oh, my messenger reached you then?" asked Holmes. "Yes, and I confess that the contents startled me beyond measure. Have you good authority for what you say?" "The best possible." Lord St. Simon sank into a chair and passed his hand over his forehead. "Oh, what will the Duke say," he murmured, "when he hears that one of the family has been subjected to such humiliation?" Who's the Duke to Lord St. Simon? Yeah, this is his dad. Remember, Lord St. Simon is the second son. That means he will not get anything after his father dies. His brother will. He'll only get anything if his brother and his father die. His father also has absolutely no money. So all he's going to get is just the title of Duke. That's it. "It is the purest accident. I cannot allow that there is any humiliation." You look on these things from another standpoint. I fail to see that anyone is to blame. I can hardly see how the lady could have acted otherwise, though her abrupt method of doing it was undoubtedly to be regretted. Having no mother, she had no one to advise her at such a crisis. It was a slight, sir, a public slight, said Lord St. Simon, tapping his fingers upon the table. You must make allowance for this poor girl, placed in so unprecedented a position. So we have this really strange thing happening here. We have, we don't really know what's happening here. This is going to be kind of creating tension in us since we don't know what they're talking about. But we do know that apparently there's an issue with Lady St. Simon, his now new wife, who disappeared on the day of the wedding, and how she is not really who she has claimed to be. She has been put into a position she did not understand. So there's some type of humiliation going on with Lord St. Simon here and her. So Sherlock Holmes says, you must make allowance for this poor girl, placed in a so unprecedented position. So she has been thrust from her that she does not understand what she's doing. I will make no allowance. I am very angry indeed, and I have been shamefully used. I think that I heard a ring, said Holmes. Yes, there are steps in the landing. If I cannot persuade you to take a lenient view of the matter, Lord St. Simon, I have brought an advocate here who may be more successful. He opened the door and ushered in a lady and gentleman. Lord St. Simon, said he, allow me to introduce you to Mr. and Mrs. Francis Hay Moulton. The lady, I think, you have already met. At the sight of these newcomers, our client had sprung from his seat and stood very erect, with his eyes cast down and his hand thrust into the breast of his frock coat, a picture of offended dignity. So he's like, and he's hurt. The lady had taken a quick step forward and held out her hand to him, but he still refused to raise his eyes. It was as well for his resolution, perhaps, for her pleading face was one which it was hard to resist. You are angry, Robert, said she. Well, I guess you have every cause to be. Pray, make no apology to me, said Lord St. Simon bitterly. Why would he be bitter at this random woman? Who do you think she is? More than likely, it's his wife, all right? So, I'm going to put that. Since we don't know exactly yet, I'm going to put a question mark there. His wife? Question mark. Since we don't know if that's her or not technically yet. We do know it's making him very angry. Oh, yes, I know that I've treated you real bad and that I should have spoken to you before I went, but I was kind of rattled. And from the time when I saw Frank here again, I just didn't know what I was doing or saying. I only wonder I didn't fall down and do a faint right there, before the altar. Perhaps, Mrs. Moulton, you would like my friend and me to leave the room while you explain this matter. If I may give an opinion, remarked the strange gentleman, we've had just a little too much secrecy over this business already. For my part, I would like all Europe and America to hear the rights of it. So, we have this random couple walking. We still don't know who they are technically. We do know that the woman is making Lord St. Simon very angry. And this man, this random man, has just said, listen, I'm tired of all this secrecy. Let's lay everything out. It was a small, wiry, sunburnt man, clean-shaven with a sharp face and alert manner. Real quick here. If we imagined a kind of a decent-looking guy who is rather small, he is wiry, means that he has some good muscle, but it's like thin muscle. Like he's not like buff, right? He is still pretty strong, he's just wiry. He's sunburnt, clean-shaven, with a sharp face and alert manner. All right? Does this describe an English person? An English person? No. England is always covered in shadow and all cloud cover. They're usually super pale. This is describing an American man. All right, someone who likes being outside, who is strong, who is sunburnt, who is clean shaven, with a sharp face and alert manner. Those are hallmarks for Americans. So we know this guy is more than likely from America. And since we know that the Lady Saint Simon, or who she was supposed to marry, came from California, we might even suggest, hey, maybe this is from a man from California. Then I'll tell our story right away, said the lady. Frank here and I met in '84 in McGuire's camp near the Rockies, where Pa was working a claim, because her father was a miner, mining for gold. We were engaged to each other, Frank and I, but then one day Father struck a rich pocket and made a pile, while poor Frank here had a claim that petered out and came to nothing. The richer Pa grew, the poorer was Frank. So at last Pa wouldn't hear of our engagement lasting any longer, and he took me away to Frisco. What's Frisco? San Francisco, right? Now remember, this lady has never had any real education, so a lot of her speech is slang. That's why she says, Pa, things like that. Well, he made a pile. He made a bunch of money at killing. Money. Frank wouldn't throw up his hand, though, so he followed me there, and he saw me without Pa knowing anything about it. It would only have made him mad to know, so we just fixed it all up for ourselves. Frank said that he would go and make his pile too, or his money too, and never come back to claim me until he had as much as Pa. So then I promised to wait for him to the end of time, and pledged myself not to marry anyone else while he lived. Why shouldn't we be married right away then, said he, and then I will feel sure of you, and I won't claim to be your husband until I come back. Well, we talked it over, and he had fixed it all up so nicely with a clergyman, all ready and waiting, that we just did it right there. And then Frank went off to seek his fortune, and I went back to Paul. So, before she was even married, or even engaged to Lord St. Simon, she had already been married. She was still currently married to this Frank fellow. The next I heard of Frank was that he was in Montana, and that then he went prospecting in Arizona. And then I heard of him from New Mexico. After that came a long newspaper story about how a miner's camp had been attacked by Apache Indians, and there was my Frank's name among the killed. I fainted dead away, and I was fair sick for months after. Paul thought I had a decline and took me to half doctors in Frisco. Not a word of news came for a year and more, so that I never doubted that Frank was really dead. Then Lord St. Simon came to Frisco, and we came to London, and a marriage was arranged, and Pa was very pleased, but I felt all the same that no man on this earth would ever take the place in my heart that had been given to my poor Frank. Still, if I had married Lord St. Simon, of course, I'd have done my duty by him. We can't command our love, but we can our actions. I went to the altar with him with the intention to make him just as good a wife as it was and has been me to be. But you may imagine what I felt when, just as I came to the altar rails, I glanced back and saw Frank, standing and looking at me out of the first pew. I thought it was his ghost at first, but then I looked again. There he was still, with a kind of question in his eyes, as if to ask me whether I were glad or sorry to see him. I wonder I didn't drop. I know that everything was turning around, and the words of the clergyman were just little like the buzz of a bee in my ear. I didn't know what to do. Should I stop the service and make a scene in the church? I glanced at him again, and he seemed to know what I was thinking, for he raised his finger to his lips to tell me to be still. Then I saw him scribble on a piece of paper, and I knew that he was writing a note. As I passed his pew on the way out, I dropped my bouquet over to him. So we see that she did not just drop her bouquet on accident by any means. Everything was a setup. This person, this Frank, this Dillman person, knew her. He was her husband, essentially. And that she purposely dropped her bouquet so that she could get a note from him. Slipped the note into my hand when he returned me the flowers. It was only a line asking me to join him when he made the sign to me to do so. Of course, I never doubted for a moment that my first duty was now to him, and I determined to do just whatever he might direct. When I got back and I told my maid, who had known him in California and had always been his friend, I ordered her to say nothing, but to get a few things packed and my ulster ready. I know I ought to have spoken to Lord St. Simon, but it was a dreadful heart before his mother and all those great people. I just made up my mind to run away and explain afterwards. I hadn't been at the table 10 minutes before I saw Frank out the window at the other side of the road. He beckoned to me and then began walking into the park. I slipped out, put on my things, and followed him. Some woman came talking something or other about Lord St. Simon to me. Seemed to me from the little I heard as he had a little secret of his own before marriage also. But I managed to get away from her and soon overtook Frank. We got into a cab together, and away we drove to some lodgings he had taken in Gordon Square. And that was my true wedding, after all those years of waiting. Frank had been a prisoner among the Apaches, had escaped, came to Frisco, found that I had given him up for dead, and had gone to England, followed me there, and had come upon me at last on the very morning of my second wedding. So that's like a movie right there by itself. I don't care about any of these people. I want to care about Frank. All right, I want that story there. I saw it in the paper, explained the American. It gave the name and the church, but not where the lady lived. Then we had a talk as to what we should do. Oh, I'm sorry, that's actually a new person there. Then we had a talk as to what we should do, and Frank was all for openness. But I was so ashamed of it all that I felt as if I should like to vanish away and never see any of them again. Just sending a line to Paul, perhaps, to show him that I was alive. It was awful to me to think of all those lords and ladies sitting around that breakfast table and waiting for me to come back. So Frank took my wedding clothes and things and made a bundle of them so that I should not be traced, and dropped them away somewhere where no one could find them. It is likely that we should have gone on to Paris tomorrow, only that this good gentleman, Mr. Holmes, came round to us this evening. Though how he found us is more than I can think, and he showed us very clearly and kindly that I was wrong, and that Frank was right, and that we should be putting ourselves in the wrong if we were so secret. Then he offered to give us a chance of talking to Lord St. Simon alone, and so we came right away round to his rooms at once. Now, Robert, you have heard it all, and I am very sorry if I've given you pain, and I hope that you do not think very meanly of me. Lord St. Simon had by no means relaxed his rigid attitude. He had listened with a frowning brow and a compressed lip to this long narrative. And that was a long narrative. So the whole time he was just like angry the whole time. He had his hand in his pocket, probably in his pocket in here. He was looking at the ground angry. "Excuse me," he said, "but it is not my custom to discuss my most intimate personal affairs in this public manner." "Then you won't forgive me? You won't shake hands before I go?" "Oh, certainly. If it would give you any pleasure." He put out his hand and coldly grasped that which she extended to him. So he just did coldly. Fine, then. "I had hoped," suggested Holmes, "that you would have joined us in a friendly supper." "I think that there you ask a little too much," responded his lordship. "I may be forced to acquiesce in these recent developments, but I can hardly be expected to make merry over them. I think that with your permission, I will now wish you all a very good night." He included us all in a sweeping bow and stalked out of the room. "Then I will trust you at least will honor me with your company," said Sherlock Holmes. "It is always a joy to meet an American, Mr. Moulton, for I am one of those who believe that the folly of a monarch and the blundering of a minister in far-gone years will not prevent our children from being someday citizens of the same worldwide country, under a flag which shall be a quartering of the Union, Jack with the stars and stripes." So Sherlock, he leaves. The Lord leaves, Lord St. Simon. He just books it out. And finally we have Sherlock Holmes talks to the American. Says, "Hey, why don't you come let's talk. I always love meeting an American." And then we have this space here. With this space, we can assume some time has passed. "The case has been an interesting one," remarked Holmes when our visitors had left us. So we see that time jump there after dinner. "Because it serves to show very clearly how simple the explanation may be of an affair which at first sight seems to be almost inexplainable or inexplicable. Nothing could be more natural than the sequence of events as narrated by this lady, and nothing stranger than the result when viewed, for instance, by Mr. Lestrade of Scotland Yard. You are not yourself at fault at all, then. From the first, two facts were very obvious to me. The one that the lady had been quite willing to undergo the wedding ceremony, the other that she had repented of it within a few minutes of returning home. Obviously, something had occurred during the morning, then to cause her to change her mind. What could that something be? She could not have spoken to anyone when she was out, for she had been in the company of the bridegroom. Had she seen someone then? If she had, it must be someone from America, because she had spent so short a time in this country that she could hardly have allowed anyone to acquire so deep an influence over her that the mere sight of him would induce her to change her plans so completely. So he said, this is obvious. The reason why I knew it's an American that she saw was because no one else, she had only been in this country for like a month at most. She wouldn't have been able to fall in love with someone that quickly. Not to make her completely change her mind over marrying this this lord. You see, we already arrived by a process of exclusion at the idea that she might have seen an American. Then who could this American be, and why should he possess so much influence over her? It might be a lover, it might be a husband. Her young womanhood, had I knew, been spent in rough scenes and under strange conditions. So far I had got before I ever heard Lord St. Simon's narrative, when he told us a man in a pew of the change of the bride in the bride's manner, of so transparent a device for obtaining a note as the dropping of a bouquet, of her resort to her confidential maid, and of her very significant allusion to claim jumping, which in miners' parlance, so that one right there might throw us off a little bit. Miners' parlance, that's in miners' speak, or miners' speech. Y'all know how there are some things that like mean certain things with where you are, like an inside joke. Only a certain group of people would understand the inside joke. Same thing with speech. For instance, when we say y'all, someone from Japan learning our language would go, what is that? What is y'all? They would not understand. Same thing here. Because in minor speech, claim jumping means something. Claim jumping, in miner's parlance, means taking possession of that which another person has a prior claim. So it means just stealing, essentially. Jumping into someone else's claim. The whole situation became absolutely clear. She had gone off with a man. And the man was either a lover or was a previous husband. The chances being in favor of the latter. And how in the world did you find them? Because he's the one who went to their apartment and found them where they are. So how did he find them? It might have been difficult, but friend Lestrade held information in his hands, the value of which he did not himself know. The initials were, of course, of the highest importance. But more valuable still was it to know that within a week he had settled his bill at one of the most select London hotels. Well, how did he deduce the select, or the hotel? By the select prices. 8 shillings for a bed, and 8 pence for a glass of sherry, put into one of the most expensive hotels. There are not many in London which charge at that rate. In the second one, which I visited in Northumberland Avenue, I learned by an inspection of the book that Francis H. Moulton, an American gentleman, had left only the day before. And looking over the entries against him, I came upon the very items which I had seen in the duplicate bill. His letters were to be forwarded to 226 Gordon Square. So thither I traveled, and being fortunate enough to find the loving couple at home, I ventured to give them some paternal advice and to point out to them that it would be better in every way that they should make their position a little clearer, both to the general public and to Lord St. Simon in particular. So he found out which hotel they lived in, or which hotel he was from, by the prices on the back of that note that he listed out, which is that's amazing. It'd be like if you bought a dinner and the dinner ended up being like $100 for a steak. That's a lot of money. But how many places in, let's say, Memphis sell a steak for that much? Is it a lot? You think there are like 50 places in Memphis that sell a $100 steak? No, all right, probably not there. Okay, so you could narrow it down to however many, and that's what he did there. And from there, they used to have like books in hotels where like if you stayed there, they would write your name in it. So that's how he was able to find out the name. He went and checked each of the names for an FHM. I invited them to meet him here, and as you see, I made him keep the appointment. But with no very good result, I remarked. His conduct was so certainly not very gracious. Talking about Lord St. Simon. Ah, Watson, said Holmes, smiling. Perhaps you would not be very gracious either, if after all the trouble of wooing and wedding, you found yourself deprived in an instant of wife and a fortune. I think that we may judge Lord St. Simon very mercifully, and thank our stars that we are never likely to find ourselves in the same position. Draw your chair up and hand me my violin, for the only problem we have still to solve is how to while away these bleak autumnal evenings. We covered it very briefly our first day, so before we end it, I just want to cover that. What does that word sound like? Autumn, right? If we just took off the A there. So that tells us when this story is taking place, right? This is obviously in the autumn, so it's going to be the fall, right? The autumn evenings are going to be cold and dreary, so they're going to have to find a way to while away the hours while it gets cold. So ladies and gents, that is our story in its entirety, all right? So let's go ahead and dive into our last little bit of work for today. There's nothing too difficult with it.